The rain fell in steady sheets over Norfolk, Virginia, drumming against the windows of the small diner on Granby Street. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon grease hung thick in the air, mixing with the low hum of conversation from the handful of early morning customers. It was the kind of place that had seen better days, with cracked vinyl booths and faded photographs of Navy ships lining the walls, a testament to the military town it served. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a pale, washed-out glow that made even the youngest faces look tired. A waitress named Dolores, who had been working here for 32 years, moved between the tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. She refilled coffee cups without being asked and cleared plates before customers had finished pushing them away. The regulars knew her name, knew her story, knew that she had raised 3 kids on tips alone after her husband left for a woman half his age. This diner was her kingdom, and she ruled it with a firm hand and a soft heart. Marcus Cole sat alone in the corner booth, his broad shoulders hunched over a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. Dolores had offered to warm it up twice already, but he had waved her off with a distracted nod. She knew better than to push. Men like Marcus, the ones with the 1,000-yard stare and the scars they tried to hide, needed to be left alone until they were ready to talk. At 47, his face bore the weathered look of a man who had seen too much and forgotten too little. The lines around his steel-grey eyes told stories he would never speak aloud, and the silver threading through his close-cropped black hair seemed to have appeared overnight, though it had been creeping in for years. He had been a Navy SEAL for 22 years, 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq, countless classified operations that would never see the light of day. He had earned medals that sat in a drawer he never opened, commendations that meant nothing to him now. What mattered was surviving, getting through each day without the memories drowning him. The doctors at the VA called it PTSD, gave it a name and a diagnosis and a handful of pills that were supposed to make it better. Sometimes they did, mostly they just dulled the edges. He came to this diner every Tuesday and Thursday morning, always the same booth, always the same order of black coffee and dry toast that he never finished. It was a ritual, a small anchor in a life that often felt adrift. The bell above the door chimed and Marcus glanced up instinctively, his body tensing in that automatic way it always did when someone entered his space. Old habits died hard, if they died at all. A young woman stepped inside, shaking the rain from her dark hair. She was maybe 20, 21 at most, with sharp features and eyes that held a hardness beyond her years. She wore a leather jacket that looked too big for her slender frame, and her jeans were faded and worn at the knees. There was a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, the kind that suggested she had been traveling light and traveling far. She paused just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the fluorescent glare. Water dripped from her jacket onto the linoleum floor. Something about her made Marcus pause, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. There was something familiar in the set of her jaw, the way she carried herself, like she was ready for a fight that hadn't started yet. She moved with a controlled tension, every muscle coiled and ready, the way Marcus had seen soldiers move in hostile territory. But she wasn't a soldier. She was too young, too raw, too obviously driven by something personal rather than professional. The young woman scanned the diner, her gaze sweeping past the tired waitress, the old man reading his newspaper, the couple arguing in hushed tones near the window. When her eyes landed on Marcus, they stopped. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she started walking toward him, her boots leaving wet prints on the linoleum floor. Her hand was in her jacket pocket, and Marcus felt his instincts flare, a warning signal that had kept him alive through ambushes and firefights and moments when death had been close enough to touch. She stopped at his booth, looking down at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Marcus Cole," she said. It wasn't a question. "Who's asking?" She slid into the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. Up close, He could see the shadows under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. She was running on adrenaline and fear and something else, something that burned like fury. "My name is Elena," she said. "Elena Vasquez." The name hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. For a moment the diner seemed to fade away, and he was back in a cramped apartment in San Diego nearly 22 years ago. He could smell the jasmine perfume, feel the warmth of a body pressed against his, hear the laughter that had made him forget, just for a little while, all the darkness he carried. Carmen Vasquez. She'd been a waitress at a bar near the base, working her way through community college while dreaming of something bigger. They had met on a night when Marcus was drinking to forget a mission that had gone wrong, and she had cut him off after his fourth whiskey, telling him that whatever he was running from would still be there in the morning, hangover or not. He had laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months, and something had sparked between them, something electric and terrifying and impossible to ignore. They had spent 3 months together, 3 months of stolen weekends and whispered promises and a connection that had felt like salvation. She had seen through his armor, past the training and the bravado, to the broken boy underneath. And she had loved him anyway. Then he had deployed, a 6-month rotation that turned into 18 when things went sideways in the sandbox. The communication had been sporadic at best, classified at worst. By the time he came back, Carmen had moved. No forwarding address, no phone number, no trace. He had tried to find her at first, made some calls, asked some questions. But the SEAL teams didn't leave much room for personal business, and eventually he had convinced himself it was better this way. Cleaner. He wasn't the kind of man who could give someone a normal life. Now Carmen's eyes were staring back at him from a young woman's face, and Marcus felt something crack open inside him that he had spent decades trying to keep sealed shut. "You knew my mother," Elena said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were still shaking. "Carmen," Marcus breathed. Is she okay?" Something flickered across Elena's face. Pain, raw and fresh and barely contained. "She died," Elena said. 3 weeks ago, ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy as lead. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it more than he had meant anything in a long time. "I didn't know. There's a lot you didn't know." Eleanor's hand moved inside her jacket pocket, and when it came out, it was holding a gun. The diner seemed to freeze around them. Marcus felt his training kick in, calculating angles and distances, potential witnesses, exit strategies. The gun was a Glock 19, compact and deadly, and Elena was holding it with a familiarity that suggested she knew how to use it. Her grip was steady, her finger resting along the frame rather than on the trigger, the way someone who had been taught proper gun safety would hold it. Dolores had frozen behind the counter, her coffee pot suspended in mid-pour. The old man with the newspaper had gone pale, his hands gripping the table like he was afraid he might float away. The arguing couple had stopped mid-sentence, their petty disagreements suddenly irrelevant in the face of something real and dangerous. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rain still drumming against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder rolling in from the coast. But she wasn't pointing it at him, not yet. She was just holding it on the table between them, like a question that demanded an answer, like a challenge, like a daughter who had traveled 2,000 miles to confront the man who had abandoned her before she was born. "Eleanor," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and calm, "whatever you're thinking, there's a better way." "She told me about you," Elena said, "before she died. She told me everything. How you met, how you made her promises, how you left and never came back. I tried to find her. When I got back from deployment, you didn't try hard enough." Eleanor's voice cracked, and for a moment she looked like exactly what she was, a young woman who had just lost her mother and was drowning in grief and anger and confusion. "She waited for you, for months. She wrote letters that came back unopened. She called numbers that were disconnected. And then she found out she was pregnant. The word hit Marcus like a bullet. Pregnant. He stared at Elena, really looked at her, and now he could see it. The shape of her eyes, the set of her shoulders, the stubborn line of her jaw. He could see himself in her, woven into Carmen's features like a secret that had been kept for 2 decades. He started, but his voice failed him. She raised me alone, Elena continued, and now the gun was moving, lifting from the table. She worked 2 jobs, 3 sometimes, just to keep a roof over our heads. She got sick, and she kept working because she didn't have insurance, because she couldn't afford to stop. And the whole time, you were out there somewhere, living your life, not knowing we existed. Elena, I swear to you I didn't know. She protected you. Elena's laugh was bitter and broken. Even at the end, she protected you. She said you were a good man, that you would have stayed if you had known. She said I should find you, that I should give you a chance. The gun was pointing at Marcus now, steady despite the tears streaming down Elena's face. So here I am, giving you a chance. 1 question, 1 answer, and then I decide what happens next. The diner was silent. The waitress had disappeared into the kitchen. The old man with the newspaper had frozen mid-page. The arguing couple had gone quiet, their faces pale with fear. Marcus looked at the gun, then at Elena. He saw the rage in her eyes, but he also saw the hope buried beneath it, the desperate need for something she couldn't name. Ask your question, he said. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. Her voice came out as a whisper, raw and wounded and impossibly young. Who's my dad? The question hung in the air, loaded with 21 years of absence, of missed birthdays and school plays, of scraped knees that someone else had bandaged, and nightmares that someone else had soothed. Marcus met her eyes. He thought about lying, about protecting himself the way he had protected himself his whole life. But looking at this fierce, broken young woman who had his mother's stubbornness and Carmen's fire and something entirely her own, he couldn't do it. I am, he said. Eleanor, I'm your father, and I am so sorry that I wasn't there. The words seemed to drain something out of her. The gun lowered slightly, and her face crumpled into something that was half sob, half scream. Why should I believe you? Because your mother told you to find me, because she knew, even after all these years, that I would want to know, that I would want to make this right. It's too late for that. Maybe, Marcus said, but I'm going to try anyway, if you'll let me. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The rain continued to fall outside, drumming its steady rhythm against the windows. The coffee in Marcus's cup had gone completely cold. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked, and the sound seemed to come from another world entirely. Marcus could see the conflict playing out across Elena's face. The anger was still there, burning bright and hot, but beneath it was something else. Fear, maybe, or hope. The desperate, terrified hope of a child who has spent her whole life wondering why she wasn't good enough to be loved by her father. He understood that feeling. He had carried it himself, through a childhood spent bouncing from foster home to foster home, always wondering what was wrong with him, why no one wanted to keep him. The SEALs had taught him to bury it, to channel that pain into something useful, but it had never really gone away. Finally, Elena lowered the gun. She didn't put it away, just held it loosely in her lap, like a child clutching a security blanket. Her face was wet with tears and rain, and something that might have been relief. The tension in her shoulders had eased, just slightly, and for the first time she looked less like a soldier and more like a lost young woman who had just found something she had been searching for her whole life. She kept letters, Elena said quietly. Letters she never sent. She wrote to you every week for the first year, told you about the pregnancy, about me being born, about my first steps and my first words. She stopped writing eventually, but she never threw them away. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. I never got them. I know. The address was wrong. The military changed your unit assignment while you were deployed, and the letters just disappeared. A cosmic accident. A clerical error. 21 years of absence because some bureaucrat had typed the wrong numbers into a computer. "Where are you staying?" Marcus asked. "Nowhere. Motel off the highway. I've been looking for you for 2 months. How did you find me?" Elena almost smiled. "Mom kept everything. Old photos, deployment records, newspaper clippings. I traced you through the VA hospital records. You had an appointment there last month." Marcus nodded slowly. He had been going to the VA for his physical therapy, trying to work through the damage that decades of combat had done to his body. It had never occurred to him that someone might be following that trail. "The motel," he said. "Is it safe?" "Safe enough." "That's not good enough." Marcus stood, pulling out his wallet and leaving 2 20s on the table. "Come with me. I have a place, nothing fancy, but it's better than a highway motel. We can talk. Really talk." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't, not yet. But you came all this way to find me, which means some part of you wants to believe there's something worth finding. Give me a chance to prove that part right." For a long moment, Elena didn't move. Then, slowly, she tucked the gun back into her jacket and stood. "One chance," she said. "That's all you get. That's all I'm asking for." They walked out of the diner together into the rain that was finally starting to ease. The sky over Norfolk was grey and heavy, but somewhere to the east, a thin line of light was breaking through the clouds. Marcus drove a 10-year-old pickup truck that had seen better days, much like everything else in his life. The engine coughed and sputtered when he turned the key, and the windshield wipers squeaked against the glass in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, her arms crossed over her chest, staring out the window at the passing streets. The rain was beginning to ease, shifting from a downpour to a steady drizzle that painted the world in shades of grey. Puddles had formed in the potholes and gutters, reflecting the traffic lights in rippling pools of red and green and amber. Norfolk was a military town through and through, and the signs of it were everywhere. Recruiting offices and pawn shops, tattoo parlors, and bars with names like Anchors Away and the Sailor's Rest. Young men in uniform walked the sidewalks, their heads high with the invincibility of youth that Marcus remembered feeling a lifetime ago. Some of them would go on to long careers, distinguished service, comfortable retirements. Others would come home in flag-draped coffins or not come home at all. The truck's radio crackled with static. Marcus reached over and switched it off. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, filled with all the words neither of them knew how to say. "How long were you in?" Elena asked suddenly. 22 years. "Why did you get out?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. The answer to that question was complicated, wrapped up in things he didn't talk about and memories he tried not to visit. "There was an operation," he said finally. "In Afghanistan, things went wrong, people died, people who shouldn't have." "Were they your people?" "Some of them." Elena turned to look at him, and for the first time her expression held something other than anger. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. You didn't do anything. Neither did you. That's how war works, right? Bad things happen to people who don't deserve them." Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the insight. "How do you know so much about war?" "I don't. I know about bad things happening to people who don't deserve them. That's enough." They drove the rest of the way in silence. Marcus's house was a small bungalow in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom and a kitchen that was too small for anything more complicated than basic cooking. But it was his, paid off with his military pension and disability benefits, and it was the first place he had ever truly called home. The front yard was small but neat, with a patch of grass that Marcus mowed every Sunday and a row of azaleas along the fence that bloomed pink and white every spring. The neighbors were mostly other veterans, quiet people who understood the value of privacy and didn't ask questions about the nights when Marcus sat on his porch until dawn, unable to sleep. Inside, the walls were bare except for a single photograph of his SEAL team, taken before their last deployment together. Elena looked around as they stepped inside, her eyes taking in the sparse furniture, the bare walls, the stack of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. There was a worn leather couch facing an old television and a bookshelf filled with military histories and spy novels. "Cozy," she said, with just a hint of sarcasm. "I'm not here much." Marcus shrugged off his jacket and hung it by the door. "You want coffee? Beer? Something stronger?" "Coffee's fine." He moved into the kitchen, grateful for something to do with his hands. As he measured out the grounds and filled the pot with water, he could feel Elena's eyes on his back, watching him the way a prey animal watches a predator. "The guest room's down the hall," he said without turning around. "It's not much, just a bed and a dresser, but it's better than a motel. I'm not staying. I'm not asking you to move in, just stay tonight. We can talk tomorrow, figure things out. You've been on the road for 2 months. You need a real bed and a real meal." The coffee maker began to gurgle and hiss, filling the small kitchen with its rich aroma. Marcus turned to find Elena standing in the doorway, her arms still crossed, her expression unreadable. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "I pointed a gun at you. I could have killed you. But you didn't. I wanted to. Part of me still wants to." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand that. You're angry. You have every right to be. But killing me wouldn't bring your mother back, and it wouldn't give you the answers you're looking for. What makes you think I'm looking for answers? Because you came all this way. Because you didn't pull the trigger when you had the chance. Because somewhere, deep down, you're hoping that I'm not the villain your mother's story made me out to be." Elena's jaw tightened. "She never called you a villain. That's the thing. She loved you until the day she died. Even when she was sick, even when the pain was so bad she couldn't think straight, she talked about you like you were some kind of hero. I'm not a hero. I know. Heroes don't abandon their families." The words were sharp, but Marcus didn't flinch. He had spent enough time in therapy, both the official VA kind and the unofficial bottle of whiskey kind, to know that some wounds needed to be opened before they could heal. "You're right," he said. "I wasn't there. I can't change that. But I can be here now, if you'll let me." The coffee maker beeped, signaling that it was done. Marcus poured 2 cups and handed one to Elena. She took it, her fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic, and for a moment they just stood there, 2 strangers connected by blood and loss, and a history that neither of them fully understood. "Tell me about her," Marcus said quietly. "Tell me about your mother." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with a fierce determination that reminded Marcus so much of Carmen it made his chest ache. "She was strong," Elena said. "The strongest person I've ever known. She raised me on her own, never complained, never asked for help. She worked at a laundromat during the day and cleaned offices at night. Every Sunday, she would make arroz con pollo, even when we couldn't afford the chicken, because she said it was important to have traditions." Marcus listened, drinking in every word like a man dying of thirst. He pictured Carmen in a small apartment, humming to herself as she cooked, her dark hair pinned up away from her face. He pictured Elena as a baby, as a toddler, as a child growing up without ever knowing his name. "She taught me how to fight," Elena continued. "Not physically, but emotionally. She said the world would try to break me, and my job was to not let it. She said I came from strong people even if I didn't know them." She was right. Was she? "I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm falling apart." Marcus set down his coffee cup and moved toward her, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Strength isn't about not falling apart," he said. "It's about putting yourself back together when you do. You tracked me down across 2,000 miles. You walked into that diner ready to face whatever you found. That takes more courage than most people have in a lifetime." Elena looked up at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw something other than anger in her eyes. He saw fear and hope, and the beginning of something that might someday become trust. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to have a father. I don't know how to be one, but maybe we can figure it out together." The night passed slowly. measured in cups of coffee and halting conversations and silences that were sometimes awkward and sometimes comfortable. Elena eventually agreed to sleep in the guest room, though Marcus suspected she kept the gun under her pillow. He didn't blame her. Trust was something that had to be earned, not given. He lay awake in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Carmen. He thought about the letters she had written, the ones he had never received. He thought about the life they might have had, if circumstances had been different, if the universe had been kinder. But mostly, he thought about Elena, his daughter. A word that felt foreign on his tongue, like a language he had never learned. She had his temper, that much was clear, and Carmen's determination, and something else, something uniquely her own, a fire that burned beneath the surface and refused to be extinguished. He thought about all the years he had wasted, all the moments he had missed, first steps and first words. School plays and soccer games, graduations and heartbreaks, and all the tiny precious moments that made up a life. He couldn't get those back, but maybe, just maybe, he could build something new. The next morning dawned grey and damp, the kind of morning that seemed to seep into your bones and settle there. Marcus was up early, a habit ingrained by decades of military service, and had breakfast ready by the time Eleanor emerged from the guest room. She looked different in the morning light, softer somehow, the hard edges of the night before worn down by sleep. Her hair was mussed, and she had dark circles under her eyes, but there was colour in her cheeks that hadn't been there before. "You cook," she said, eyeing the scrambled eggs and toast on the table. "Basic survival skill. The SEALs taught me a lot of things, but gourmet cuisine wasn't one of them." Eleanor sat down across from him and picked up her fork. For a few minutes, they ate in silence, the only sounds the scrape of utensils and the distant rumble of traffic. "I have questions," Elena said finally. "I figured you would. Will you answer them honestly?" "I'll try. Some things I can't talk about, classified stuff from my service. But anything about me, about your mother, I'll tell you what I know." Eleanor set down her fork and looked at him with those sharp, searching eyes. "Why did you join the military?" It wasn't the question Marcus had expected, but he answered it anyway. "I was 18. Angry, lost. I grew up in foster care, bounced around from house to house, never really belonged anywhere. The Navy offered me a place, a purpose, something to fight for. And the SEALs, that came later. I wanted to be the best at something, to prove that I was worth something. The SEAL program nearly killed me, but it also made me who I am. Is that a good thing?" Marcus considered the question. "I don't know. I've done things I'm proud of and things I'm not. I've saved lives and taken them. I've been a hero and a monster, sometimes in the same day." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question he had been dreading. "Would you have stayed?" "If you had known about me?" The answer came without hesitation. "Yes." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I spent 22 years looking for something to belong to, a team, a mission, a purpose. If I had known I had a family, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of it. But you didn't know." "No, I didn't." Elena pushed her plate away and leaned back in her chair. "The letters," she said. "Mum's letters. I have them, all of them." Marcus felt his heart clench. "You brought them?" "They're in my bag. I was going to burn them in front of you at first. That was the plan. Make you watch everything she wanted to say to you turn to ash. What changed your mind? I don't know. Maybe the way you looked at me in the diner. Like you were seeing a ghost. Not a ghost, a miracle." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "Don't say things like that. It's true. I spent 47 years thinking I would die alone, that there was nothing left of me worth passing on, and then you walked through that door and suddenly everything changed. I don't want to be your redemption story. You're not. You're your own story. I'm just hoping you'll let me be a part of it." The days that followed were a delicate dance of approach and retreat. Elena stayed in the guest room, but she spent most of her time elsewhere, exploring the city or sitting in coffee shops with her laptop. Marcus gave her space, knowing that pushing too hard would only push her away. When they were together, they talked. About Carmen, about Elena's childhood, about the dreams she had put on hold when her mother got sick. "I wanted to be a nurse," Elena said one evening as they sat on the small back porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the kind of sunset that made you believe, just for a moment, that the world might be a beautiful place after all. "I was in nursing school when Mum was diagnosed, second year, top of my class. I had professors telling me I could go all the way, become a nurse practitioner, maybe even go to medical school if I wanted, and then the phone rang and everything changed." She paused, picking at the label on her beer bottle. Marcus had offered her something stronger, but she had refused, saying she needed to stay sharp. Old habits, he supposed. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 18, stubborn to the end. That was Mom. She kept telling me to go back to school, that she didn't need a babysitter, that she could take care of herself. But I saw the way her hands shook when she tried to make dinner. I saw the way she gasped for breath after climbing a single flight of stairs. There was no way I was leaving her alone. "Will you go back?" "I don't know. The program won't take me back until next fall, and I don't have the money for tuition anyway. Mum's medical bills ate through everything we had. The insurance company fought us on every claim, every treatment, every single pill. By the end, I was working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and the creditors at bay." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "I have money. Not a lot, but enough. If you want to go back to school, I can help." Elena stiffened. "I don't want your charity. It's not charity, I don't know what to call it. Making up for lost time? You can't buy forgiveness." "I'm not trying to. I'm trying to help my daughter build a future. That's what fathers do, isn't it?" The word hung in the air between them. Father. Elena had said it a few times in the past week, always with a hesitation, like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. "I'll think about it," she said finally. It was a small victory, but Marcus would take it. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Elena stopped keeping the gun under her pillow. She started joining Marcus for breakfast, and then for dinner, and then for the quiet evening hours when the house felt less like a shelter and more like a home. She read Carmen's letters to him one by one, her voice steady even as Marcus's eyes filled with tears. The letters painted a picture of a life he had never known, a woman who had loved him even when she had every reason not to. "Dear Marcus," the first letter began, "I know you're gone, but I have to believe you'll come back. I have something to tell you, something wonderful and terrifying. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." The letters chronicled everything: Elena's birth, her first smile, her first tooth, Carmen's fears and hopes and late-night prayers for a man who never came home. "I used to be angry at you," one letter said, dated 3 years after Elena was born. "I used to dream of finding you and screaming at you until my throat was raw. But then I look at Elena, and I see your eyes looking back at me, and I can't stay angry. You gave me the best thing in my life, even if you don't know it." The last letter was dated 2 weeks before Carmen's death. "Marcus, if you're reading this, it means Elena found you. It means she was brave enough to do what I never could. Please take care of her. She's strong, stronger than she knows, but she's going to need someone in her corner. Be that someone. Be the father she deserves. I never stopped loving you. I hope you know that. Forever, Carmen." When Elena finished reading, they sat in silence for a long time. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "She wanted me to find you," Elena said quietly. "She planned this whole thing, the letters, the documents, everything. She knew she was dying, and she wanted to make sure I wasn't alone. She knew me better than I knew myself. She said that once. She said you were the kind of man who would step up when it mattered, if someone just gave you the chance." Marcus looked at his daughter, this young woman who had walked into his life with a gun and a question and turned everything upside down. "I'm going to try to be that man," he said. "I can't promise I'll get it right, but I'm going to try." Elena reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him voluntarily, and Marcus felt something break loose inside him, a dam that had been holding back decades of loneliness and regret. "That's all I'm asking for," she said. A month after Eleanor arrived in Norfolk, she agreed to enroll in the nursing program at Old Dominion University. Marcus helped her with the application, and when the acceptance letter came, they celebrated with Chinese takeout and a bottle of champagne that Elena said was too expensive, and Marcus said wasn't expensive enough. She moved into the guest room permanently, and Marcus found himself adjusting to the rhythms of having another person in his space. He learned that she liked her coffee with cream and 2 sugars, that she sang in the shower when she thought no one could hear, that she hated mushrooms but would eat them anyway if he put them in dinner. He learned that she had nightmares, sometimes, about her mother's last days. He learned that she would wake up crying and pretend she hadn't been when he knocked on her door. He learned that the best thing he could do was leave a cup of tea outside her room and not ask questions. They fought too, about money, about boundaries, about all the years that stood between them like a wall neither of them knew how to climb. The arguments came out of nowhere sometimes, triggered by something small and insignificant that somehow mushroomed into something bigger. "You can't just throw money at every problem," Elena shouted one night, after Marcus had tried to buy her a new car to replace the rusted Honda she had driven across the country. The Honda had barely made it, coughing and sputtering its way through 2,000 miles of highway, and Marcus had been terrified every time she left the house that it would break down and leave her stranded. "I'm not trying to throw money at it. I'm trying to help. That car is a death trap. It got me here, didn't it? It's been with me through everything. Mom and I bought it together the summer before I started college. It was the first big purchase I ever made, and we were so proud of ourselves for talking the dealer down $500. Her voice cracked on the memory, and Marcus realized that the car wasn't just a car. It was a connection to her mother. "I don't need your help. I've been taking care of myself for 21 years. "I know, and you've done an incredible job. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Maybe I don't know how to do it any other way." The fight ended the way most of their fights ended, with Elena storming off to her room and Marcus sitting alone in the kitchen, wondering if he would ever learn how to be a father. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat at the table until the sun came up, turning Elena's words over in his mind like stones in a tumbler. But the next morning, she came to breakfast with red-rimmed eyes and an apology on her lips. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm not used to having someone want to take care of me. It feels scary. I understand. I'm not used to having someone to take care of. We're both figuring this out." "Yeah, I guess we are." She accepted the car, eventually, and slowly the wall between them began to crumble. Spring came to Norfolk in a riot of color, azaleas and dogwoods and cherry blossoms, painting the city in shades of pink and white. Elena started her classes at ODU, and Marcus found himself slipping into a new routine, one that included packed lunches and late-night study sessions, and the particular pride that came from watching his daughter excel. She was brilliant, it turned out, quick and sharp and hungry for knowledge in a way that reminded Marcus of himself at her age. Her professors praised her work, and her classmates respected her dedication, and slowly she began to build a life in Norfolk that was entirely her own. But the past had a way of catching up with you, Marcus knew, and one day in late April, it came knocking on their door. Marcus was in the backyard, doing maintenance on the small garden he had started when he heard the car pull into the driveway. He straightened up, wiping the dirt from his hands, and felt his instincts flare as a black SUV with government plates rolled to a stop. The vehicle was immaculate, the kind of clean that suggested it had been detailed that morning specifically to make an impression. The windows were tinted dark. 2 men got out, both wearing the kind of dark suits that screamed federal agent. One was older, with silver hair and a face like carved granite. The other was younger, with sharp eyes and a nervous energy that suggested he hadn't been in the field long. Marcus set down his gardening gloves and walked toward them. Old enemies, old debts, old sins coming home to roost. "Mr. Cole," the older man said, extending a hand. "I'm Agent Harrison, FBI. This is Agent Reeves. Can we have a word?" "What's this about?" "It's about your daughter, Mr. Cole. Elena Vasquez." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He fought to keep his expression neutral, but something must have shone in his eyes, because Agent Harrison's face softened just slightly. "She's not in trouble," the agent said quickly. "Not exactly, but there are some questions we need to ask. Can we come inside?" Marcus led them into the house, his mind still racing. Eleanor was at class, wouldn't be home for hours. Whatever this was, he would handle it alone. The agent sat down at the kitchen table, and Agent Harrison pulled a folder from his briefcase. "2 months ago," he began, "your daughter was in San Diego, attending to her mother's final affairs. During that time, she accessed some sensitive information." "What kind of information?" "Medical records, military records, things that are supposed to be protected by multiple layers of security." Harrison opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this man?" Marcus looked at the photo. It showed a man in his 60s with steel grey hair and cold eyes that seemed to bore right through the camera. "No," Marcus said. "Should I?" "His name is Richard Morse. He was a Navy commander, retired 15 years ago. He was also your handler for Operation Nightfall in 2003. The name sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Operation Nightfall was supposed to be buried so deep that even the people who had been part of it didn't talk about it. It was the mission that had cost Marcus his faith in the system, the one that had shown him just how far some people were willing to go in the name of national security. What does this have to do with Eleanor? Morse has been under investigation for the past 2 years. Financial irregularities, suspicious contacts with foreign agents. We believe he's been selling classified information to hostile powers, including information about Operation Nightfall and the operatives involved." Marcus's blood ran cold. "You're saying he's been selling information about me, about you, and about everyone else who was part of that operation, including your daughter's mother, Carmen. She wasn't part of any operation." "No, but she was connected to you. Morse knew about your relationship. He knew about the pregnancy, and he used that information as leverage, as part of a larger web of secrets and lies." The pieces began to fall into place, horrible and inevitable as dominoes toppling. "The letters," Marcus said, "Carmen's letters. They were intercepted." "We believe so. Morse was in a position to redirect military mail. He could have easily ensured that any correspondence between you and Ms. Vasquez never reached its destination." "But why? Why would he care about a sailor's love letters?" Agent Harrison's expression was grim. "Control, Mr. Cole. Morse built his career on controlling people, on knowing their secrets and using them as leverage. He kept you isolated from any personal connections because he wanted you focused on the mission. A soldier with nothing to lose is a more effective weapon." Marcus felt rage building inside him, hot and bright and barely contained. 22 years. He had lost 22 years with Carmen, with Elena, because some bureaucrat had decided his personal life was an inconvenience. "Where is he now?" Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous. "That's the problem. Morse disappeared 3 weeks ago, right around the time your daughter started digging into the records. We believe he knows she's looking for answers, and we believe he sees her as a threat." The rage turned to ice. "You're telling me my daughter is in danger? We're telling you to be careful. Morse has resources, connections, people who owe him favors. He won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens to expose him." Marcus stood up so abruptly that his chair clattered to the floor. "I need to warn her. I need to—" "Mr. Cole, please." Agent Harrison raised a hand. "We have people watching her. She's safe for now. But we need your help to bring Morse in. You know him better than anyone. You know how he thinks, how he operates. You want me to help you catch him. We want you to help us stop him before anyone else gets hurt." Marcus stood there, fists clenched, mind racing. He thought about Elena, about Carmen, about all the years that had been stolen from them. He thought about Morse, sitting in some dark room somewhere, pulling strings and ruining lives like it was all just a game. "Fine," Marcus said. "I'll help, but when we find him, he's mine." Agent Harrison didn't argue. Elena took the news better than Marcus had expected. She sat at the kitchen table listening as he explained about Morse, about the intercepted letters, about the danger that might be coming her way. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him with those sharp, determined eyes. "So some guy has been messing with our lives for 20 years, she said, "and now he's scared because I started asking questions." That's the short version, yes. Good. He should be scared. "Elena, this isn't a game. Morse is dangerous. He has resources." "I know. You already told me." She stood up and began pacing, the way she always did when she was working through a problem. "But running away isn't going to fix anything. If this guy wants to come after me, he'll find a way. The only way to stop him is to take him down first. That's what the FBI is trying to do. The FBI has been trying for 2 years. Maybe they need some help." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He recognized that look in her eyes, that fierce determination that wouldn't be swayed by logic or caution. It was the same look Carmen had given him when she decided she was going to love him. Consequences be damned. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Elena smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw himself in her. "I found him once before," she said. "I can find him again. All I need is access to the right information. The FBI has access to every database. The FBI has to follow rules. I don't." It was a bad idea. Marcus knew it was a bad idea, but looking at his daughter, seeing the fire in her eyes and the steel in her spine, he couldn't bring himself to stop her. "Okay," he said, "we do this together, but we do it smart. No unnecessary risks. Deal." They worked through the night, Elena on her laptop and Marcus on the phone with old contacts from his SEAL days. By dawn, they had a lead. An off-the-books property in rural Virginia, purchased by a shell company that traced back to one of Morse's known associates. They shared their findings with the FBI, but Elena insisted on being part of the operation. "Absolutely not," Agent Harrison said. "This is a federal operation. Civilians aren't allowed." "I'm not a civilian," Elena countered. "I'm the person who found your lead. Without me, you'd still be chasing your tails." "Miss Vasquez—" "She's right," Marcus interrupted. "Elena knows more about Morse's digital footprint than any of your analysts. She stays in the command vehicle, away from the action, but she stays." Harrison looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's tone stopped him. "Fine," the agent said. "But if anything goes wrong, it's on you." "It always is." The operation launched at dawn, 2 days later. A team of FBI agents and local law enforcement surrounded the rural property, a small farmhouse nestled in the Virginia hills. Elena sat in the command vehicle, monitoring communications and running real-time analysis on the data streams. Marcus was with the tactical team, moving through the trees toward the house. He had refused to stay behind, refused to let others take risks that should have been his. The farmhouse was quiet as they approached. Too quiet. Marcus felt his instincts screaming a warning, but before he could act, the front door opened. Richard Morse stepped out onto the porch, his hands raised in surrender. He looked older than his photograph, smaller somehow, but his eyes were the same, cold and calculating and utterly devoid of warmth. He was wearing a sweater that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and his silver hair was perfectly combed, despite the early hour and the chaos surrounding him. There was something theatrical about his surrender, Marcus realized. Morse had known they were coming. "Commander Cole," Morse said, and even after all these years, the sound of his voice made Marcus's skin crawl. "I wondered when you'd come." "It's over, Morse. You're done." "Am I?" Morse smiled, and it was the smile of a man who still held cards that no one else knew about. A smile that said he had been playing this game for decades and had no intention of losing now. You think a few FBI agents and a traumatized daughter can bring me down? I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive. The game is over. No, Commander, it's just getting interesting. Morse's hand moved toward his pocket, and the tactical team surged forward, weapons raised. But Morse wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for a phone, an ordinary smartphone that looked almost comically mundane in the midst of all the tactical gear and drawn weapons. "There are files," Morse said, his finger hovering over the screen. "Files that will be released if anything happens to me. Files about Operation Nightfall, about every illegal order you followed, every innocent life you took. Your daughter might have found me, but I can destroy her father with a single press of this button." Marcus felt the world narrow to a single point. Morse's finger on that phone. "You're bluffing," he said. "Am I? You know what we did in that operation, Cole. You know the secrets we buried. Do you really want to test me?" The standoff stretched into seconds that felt like hours. Marcus thought about Elena, sitting in that command vehicle, listening to every word. He thought about the life they were just starting to build, the future they were just starting to imagine, and he thought about truth. "Release them," Marcus said. Morse's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "The files. Release them. I'm done hiding from what I did. You'll be destroyed. Your career, your reputation. My career is over. My reputation doesn't matter. What matters is my daughter, and I'm not going to let you hold her hostage with secrets that should have come out years ago." Morse stared at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "You're bluffing. Try me." The silence stretched out, taut as a wire. Then slowly, Morse lowered his hand. "You've changed, Cole." "No, I just finally figured out what's worth fighting for." The FBI moved in, surrounding Morse and taking the phone from his hand. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at Marcus with something that might have been respect. "She's got your fire," he said. "That girl, she's going to be something special." "She already is." The aftermath was messy, the way these things always were. Files were released, investigations were launched, old wounds were reopened. Marcus spent weeks in depositions and interviews, explaining decisions he had made decades ago and living with the consequences. But through it all, Elena was there. She sat beside him in courtrooms and waiting rooms. She brought him coffee when the questions dragged on, and dinner when he forgot to eat. She didn't ask for explanations or apologies. She just stayed, a steady presence in a world that had become chaos. One evening, after a particularly brutal day of testimony, they sat on the back porch, watching the fireflies emerge in the twilight. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. "Telling him to release the files?" Marcus thought about the question. "No. Those secrets were poison. They would have kept eating at me until there was nothing left." "But your reputation—" "My reputation doesn't define me. What defines me is what I do now, with the time I have left." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mom would have been proud of you." The words hit Marcus harder than any bullet ever had. "You think so?" "I know so. She always said you were a good man deep down. She said you just needed someone to remind you." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, but he didn't try to hide them. That was something else Elena had taught him, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that letting someone see your pain was sometimes the bravest thing you could do. "I miss her," he said quietly. "I know that sounds strange. Missing someone I barely knew, but I do. It doesn't sound strange. You're missing the life you could have had. Maybe, or maybe I'm just grateful for the life I'm getting now." Elena reached over and took his hand, the way she had that first night all those months ago. But this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just connection, simple and profound. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up, for being willing to fight for me. You're my daughter. Fighting for you is the easiest thing I've ever done. They sat there until the stars came out, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, building something new from the ashes of the past. Summer arrived in Norfolk like an old friend, bringing long days and warm nights and the particular magic that comes from knowing you have someone to share them with. Elena aced her first semester at ODU, earning praise from her professors and respect from her peers. She had a talent for the work, a natural ability to connect with patients and understand their needs. Marcus went to her white coat ceremony and cried openly when she walked across the stage, not caring who saw. He started volunteering at the local VA hospital, working with other veterans who were struggling to adjust to civilian life. It wasn't easy work, but it felt meaningful in a way that nothing had for a long time. For once, he was using his experience to help people heal instead of teaching them how to fight. Agent Harrison called occasionally, updating them on the case against Morse. The man had been a bigger fish than anyone realized, connected to networks that spanned continents and decades. It would take years to untangle all of it, but for now, he was in custody, his influence neutralized, his power broken. On a warm evening in July, Marcus and Elena drove out to the beach at Sandbridge. They walked along the shore as the sun set, leaving trails of footprints in the wet sand. "I've been thinking," Elena said, "about Mom, about the letters." "What about them?" "She wrote to you every week for a year. Then she stopped. I always wondered why." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Maybe she got tired of shouting into the void. Maybe. Or maybe she realized that holding on to hope was harder than letting go. Is there a difference?" Elena smiled, and in the fading light she looked so much like Carmen that Marcus's breath caught in his throat. "I think there is. Hope is about the future. Letting go is about the past." She stopped writing because she was ready to move forward, not because she stopped caring. That sounds like something a therapist would say. It is. "I started seeing someone at the Student Health Center. I figured if I'm going to help other people heal, I should probably work on healing myself first." Marcus nodded. "That's smart. I wish I had done that years ago." "It's not too late. They have family sessions, if you're interested." The offer hung in the air, tentative and hopeful. "Yeah," Marcus said, "I'd like that." They walked on in comfortable silence, the waves lapping at their feet, the stars beginning to emerge overhead. It was peaceful in a way that Marcus had never known, a quiet contentment that came from knowing exactly where you belonged. "Dad," Elena said suddenly, and the word still sent a jolt through Marcus every time he heard it. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. In the dim light, her expression was serious, but not afraid. "I forgive you." Marcus felt his heart stutter. "Elena, I know you didn't know. I know it wasn't your fault. But I needed to be angry for a while, and you let me. You didn't try to defend yourself or make excuses. You just let me feel what I needed to feel. That's what you deserved. Maybe. But a lot of people wouldn't have been able to do it. They would have gotten defensive or walked away. You stayed. Of course I stayed. You're my daughter." Elena reached out and hugged him, and Marcus held her tight, feeling the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of ways, building a bridge across the chasm that had once separated them. "I love you, Dad," Elena whispered. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything they had been through, the anger and the grief, the hope and the healing, the slow, painful work of becoming a family. "I love you too, sweetheart," Marcus said. "More than you'll ever know." When they finally pulled apart, Elena was smiling, and there were tears on her cheeks that she didn't bother to wipe away. "Come on," she said, linking her arm through his. "Let's go home." They walked back to the car as the last light faded from the sky, leaving behind the darkness and heading towards something brighter. Behind them, the ocean continued its eternal dance, waves crashing and retreating in a rhythm as old as time itself. Ahead of them lay the future, uncertain and beautiful and full of possibility. The story could have ended there, in that perfect moment on the beach, with forgiveness spoken and love acknowledged. But life doesn't work that way. Life is messy and complicated, with moments of grace punctuated by moments of chaos, and even the best-built bridges can be tested by storms. The test came in September, on a rainy evening that reminded Marcus of the day Elena had first walked into that Norfolk diner. She came home late from class, her face pale and her hands shaking, and Marcus knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? Elena sat down heavily on the couch, not bothering to take off her wet jacket. "I got a call," she said, "from a lawyer in San Diego. There's been a development with Mom's estate." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of development? Apparently, Mom had a life insurance policy, a big one. She took it out when she was first diagnosed, before the premiums got too expensive. The lawyer has been trying to track me down for months. That's good news, isn't it? Eleanor shook her head. The beneficiary isn't me. It's someone named James Caldwell. The name meant nothing to Marcus. Who is that? I don't know. The lawyer wouldn't tell me much, just that I need to come to San Diego to sort it out. Marcus's instincts were screaming again, the same warning signal that had kept him alive through decades of combat. Something doesn't feel right about this. I know, but I have to go. I need to know who this James Caldwell is, and why Mom would leave him money instead of me. I'm coming with you. Dad, you don't have to. I'm coming with you. It wasn't a suggestion. They flew out the next morning, landing in San Diego under a sky that was impossibly blue and clear. The city held memories for Marcus, ghosts of a younger man who had fallen in love in these streets and lost everything without even knowing it. The lawyer's office was downtown, in a high-rise building that gleamed in the California sun. Inside, they were met by a thin, nervous man who introduced himself as Gerald Patterson. "Thank you for coming, Miss Vasquez," he said, shaking Elena's hand. "I apologize for the mysterious circumstances. There are aspects of your mother's estate that required discretion." "Who is James Caldwell?" Patterson hesitated, glancing at Marcus with an expression that bordered on fear. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my father." The word hung in the air, and Patterson's eyebrows rose slightly. But he recovered quickly, gesturing for them to sit. "Very well, James Caldwell was your mother's brother." Eleanor went still. "That's impossible. Mom was an only child." "She was raised as an only child, yes, but she had a brother 2 years older who was given up for adoption when he was 3 years old. Your grandmother was very young when she had him, and she felt she couldn't provide the care he needed. Mom never mentioned anything about this. She didn't know. Not until about 18 months ago, when Mr. Caldwell reached out to her. He had been searching for his birth family and finally managed to track her down." Elena looked like she had been punched in the gut. "Why wouldn't she tell me?" Patterson spread his hands. "I can't speak to her reasons, but I do know that she and Mr. Caldwell met several times before she passed. They became quite close, from what I understand. And she left him the life insurance money. Half of it. The other half is yours, but there's a condition." "What kind of condition?" "Mr. Caldwell has requested to meet you. He says he has something that belonged to your mother, something she wanted you to have. He won't release it until you agree to see him." Marcus didn't like this. The whole situation felt like a trap, layers of secrets piled on top of each other like sediment. "Where is he now?" he asked. "He lives in Los Angeles. I can arrange a meeting if you're willing." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the desk in front of her. Marcus could practically see the wheels turning in her head, weighing risks and rewards, trying to decide how much more uncertainty she could handle. Finally, she looked up. "Arrange it," she said. James Caldwell turned out to be a soft-spoken man in his early 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded Marcus unsettlingly of Carmen. They met at a small restaurant in Santa Monica, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and hand-painted signs on the walls. Caldwell was already there when they arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a box on the table in front of him. He stood when he saw Elena, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "You have her eyes," Caldwell said finally. "Carmen's eyes. I've heard that before." They sat down and Caldwell slid the box across the table. "She asked me to give you this," he said. "She said you'd understand what it meant." Eleanor opened the box slowly, almost fearfully. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with a faded red ribbon and a photograph. The letters, Marcus realized with a start, were in his own handwriting. "I don't understand," Elena said. "These are letters from your father," Caldwell finished. "Carmen asked me to track them down. She spent the last year of her life trying to find proof of what had happened, trying to understand why Marcus never came back." Marcus felt the world tilt beneath him. She found them, some of them, enough to know that they had been intercepted. She was building a case against the man responsible when she got too sick to continue. Elena was pulling the letters out, one by one, her hands trembling. Each one was dated, each one was postmarked, and each one bore the same stamped notation: "Return to sender, addressee unknown." "I wrote these," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "after I got back from deployment. I wrote to her every week for months. She never received them," Caldwell said, "just like you never received hers. Someone made sure you stayed apart." The photograph was the last thing in the box. It showed Carmen and Marcus together, young and smiling, standing in front of a pier in San Diego. Marcus didn't remember the photo being taken, but he remembered that day, the sun warm on his face, Carmen's laughter in his ears, the feeling that everything was possible. On the back, in Carmen's handwriting, "We found our way back. Even if it was too late for me, it won't be too late for them." Elena looked up at Caldwell, tears streaming down her face. "She knew," she said. "She knew everything, and she spent her last months trying to fix it. She loved you both. She wanted you to have the truth, even if she couldn't be there to see you find it." Marcus sat there, holding the photograph, feeling something shift inside him. All these years, he had blamed himself for not trying hard enough, for giving up too easily. But the truth was, he had fought. He had written and called and searched. The system had just been too strong, too determined to keep him isolated. Carmen had known, and she had spent her dying days making sure her daughter would know too. "Thank you," Marcus said to Caldwell, and he meant it more than he had ever meant anything. "Don't thank me. Thank her. She was the strongest person I've ever known." Elena stood up suddenly, moving around the table to embrace her uncle. Caldwell hugged her back, and Marcus watched them, these two people connected by a woman they had both loved in different ways. For the first time, he understood what Carmen had been trying to build, not just a connection between father and daughter, but a family. A whole, complicated, messy family, bound together by love and loss and the stubborn refusal to give up. They spent the rest of the day with Caldwell, learning about his life and sharing stories about Carmen. He had children of his own, cousins Elena had never met, and a wife who insisted they all come for dinner. It was overwhelming and wonderful, and exactly the kind of chaos that families were made of. That night, back at their hotel, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, reading through Marcus's letters for the 100th time. "You really did try," she said. "You tried so hard." "Not hard enough. There's no such thing as hard enough against a system designed to break you." She set down the letters and looked at him. "You know what this means, right? All of it? The letters, the documents, everything Mom and James found? It means Morse's case just got a lot stronger. It means you're not the villain. You never were." Marcus sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the words settle over him. "I spent a long time believing I was," he admitted, "that I was the kind of man who abandoned the people he loved, that I didn't deserve a family or a home or any of the things normal people have. And now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe we all tell ourselves stories about who we are, and sometimes those stories need to be rewritten." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, the way she had started doing in the past few months, a small gesture of trust that still made Marcus's heart clench every time. "I'm glad I found you," she said. "Found. Even if I had to point a gun at you to do it." Marcus laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep inside him. "So am I, kiddo. So am I." They flew home the next day, carrying boxes of letters and photographs and enough new family connections to last a lifetime. In the months that followed, Elena finished her nursing program and got a job at the VA hospital where Marcus volunteered. They worked different shifts, but sometimes their paths crossed in the hallways, and Marcus would feel a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked him over. She was good at her job, genuinely good, with a bedside manner that put even the most difficult patients at ease. She had inherited Carmen's compassion and Marcus's stubbornness, and together those qualities made her exactly the kind of nurse that people needed. On the anniversary of Carmen's death, they drove to San Diego together to visit the small cemetery where she was buried. James Caldwell met them there, along with his wife and children, and they stood together in the California sunshine, paying tribute to a woman who had touched all their lives. Elena read a poem she had written about loss and love, and the strange way life sometimes gave you exactly what you needed, even when you didn't know you needed it. Marcus stood beside her, not speaking, not needing to. Afterward, they went to the pier where the photograph had been taken all those years ago. Marcus stood in the same spot, looking out at the same water, remembering a young man who had been so sure that love was something he could never have. "She's here," Elena said softly, standing beside him. "Can you feel it?" Marcus didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or any of the mystical things that some people clung to, but standing there with the sun warm on his face and his daughter's hand in his, he felt something, a presence, a peace. "Yeah," he said, "I can feel it." They stayed until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Then they walked back to the car, arm in arm, ready to continue the journey that had brought them to this moment. The road home was long, but neither of them minded. They had each other, and they had the future, and for the first time in either of their lives, that felt like enough. 2 years later, Elena got married. Her husband was a physical therapist named David, a calm, steady man who balanced out her fire with his own quiet strength. They had met at the VA hospital, both of them dedicating their lives to healing the wounds that others couldn't see. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of the Norfolk house that had become home. James Caldwell was there with his family, along with Elena's classmates and colleagues, and the handful of people who had become their extended family over the years. Marcus walked his daughter down the aisle, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "I wish Mom could see this," Elena whispered as they reached the altar. "She can," Marcus said. "She's been watching the whole time." He kissed her forehead and handed her off to David, then stepped back to watch the rest of the ceremony. He didn't cry, not quite, but it was a near thing. At the reception, Eleanor found him sitting alone at a corner table, watching the dancers with a small smile on his face. "Hey, stranger," she said, sliding into the chair beside him. "What are you doing over here all by yourself?" "Just thinking." "About what?" Marcus looked at his daughter, this fierce, beautiful woman who had walked into his life with a gun and a question and changed everything. "About that day in the diner," he said. "You asked me who your father was, and I told you the truth. I think that was the first time in my life I was completely honest with anyone. Was it scary, terrifying, but also freeing, like I had been carrying this weight for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight." Elena took his hand, the same gesture that had become their shorthand for everything they couldn't say. "You know what I remember about that day?" she said. "I remember being so angry I could barely see straight. I remember wanting to hurt you, to make you feel even a fraction of what I had felt growing up without a father. And now I realize that you were hurting too, that you had been hurting for a long time and you didn't know how to stop. And I think I think maybe we saved each other. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, and this time he let them fall. Yeah, he said. I think maybe we did. The music shifted to something slow, and Elena stood up, pulling him to his feet. Dance with me? I'm not much of a dancer. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. They moved onto the dance floor, swaying awkwardly in the way of people who had never learned the steps, but were determined to try anyway. Around them, the party continued, laughter and music and the warm glow of happiness. Marcus thought about Carmen, about the letters she had written and the love she had carried for so long. He thought about Morse, rotting in a federal prison, his power and influence reduced to nothing. He thought about all the years he had lost and all the years he had gained. And he thought about Eleanor, his daughter, who had given him something he never thought he would have, a second chance. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not pulling the trigger. For giving me a chance to be your father. Elena smiled, and in that smile Marcus saw Carmen and himself, and a future that stretched out before them like an endless highway. Thank you for being worth the chance, she said. They danced until the song ended, and then they danced some more, two people who had found each other against all odds, building a life from the wreckage of the past. Outside, the stars began to emerge, scattering across the Virginia sky like promises waiting to be kept. And somewhere, in that vast and mysterious universe, Carmen Vasquez was smiling. The story of Marcus Cole and Elena Vasquez didn't end with a wedding or a reconciliation or any of the tidy conclusions that fairy tales promise. It continued, the way all real stories do, with ordinary days and ordinary moments, with small victories and quiet disappointments, with the slow, steady work of building a life together. There were grandchildren eventually, a boy named Marcus and a girl named Carmen, who grew up knowing both their grandfather's strength and their great-grandmother's love. They heard the stories, the real ones, about how their mother had tracked down a stranger and demanded the truth at gunpoint. They learned that families weren't always the ones you were born into, that sometimes the people who loved you most were the ones you had to find. There were hard days too. Marcus's health declined, the cumulative damage of decades of combat catching up with him. Elena was there through the surgeries and the physical therapy, the good days and the bad days, the moments when he wondered if he had anything left to give. You gave me enough, she told him, on a particularly dark night when the pain was bad and the memories were worse. You gave me a father. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. James Caldwell became a regular presence in their lives, flying out from Los Angeles for holidays and birthdays, and the 1,000 small occasions that families gathered for. His children became Elena's cousins, and their children became playmates for Marcus and Carmen, and slowly, the family that Carmen Vasquez had dreamed of came into being. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Elena and Marcus went back to that diner in Norfolk. It had changed over the years, new owners and new decor, but the bones of it were the same. They sat in the same booth where everything had started, and they ordered coffee that was still terrible, and they talked about nothing in particular. Do you ever think about what would have happened, Elena asked, if I had never found you? Marcus considered the question. It was one he had asked himself many times over the years, in the quiet hours of the night when sleep wouldn't come. I think I would have kept going, he said finally, waking up, going through the motions, surviving but not really living. I didn't know what I was missing until you showed me. And now I know what it means to have a family, to have someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway. He reached across the table and took her hand. You saved my life, Elena. I don't say that lightly. You saved mine too. I was so lost when Mom died, so angry at everyone and everything. Finding you gave me something to focus on, something to fight for. Even if that something was a broken-down old soldier who didn't deserve your forgiveness. Eleanor smiled. Especially then. They finished their coffee and walked out into the Norfolk afternoon. The sun was shining, and the breeze carried the smell of the harbor, salt and seaweed, and the particular freshness that came from living near the water. "Dad," Elena said, and even after 10 years, the word still made Marcus's heart swell with something he couldn't quite name. "Yeah? I'm glad it was you. I'm glad. I'm glad that when I asked who my father was, the answer was someone worth knowing." Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug, right there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw. "I'm glad it was you too," he said. "My whole life, I thought I was meant to be alone. Turns out I was just waiting for you to find me." They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, bound together by blood and choice and a love that had survived secrets and lies and 22 years of separation. Then they walked to the car, got in, and drove home. Behind them, the diner continued its eternal routine, serving coffee to strangers and regulars alike, never knowing that within its walls a family had been born. Ahead of them lay the rest of their lives, uncertain and beautiful and full of possibility. And somewhere, in the space between memory and hope, Carmen Vasquez watched over them both, her heart full of all the things she had never been able to say. The rain fell in steady sheets over Norfolk, Virginia, just as it had on the day Elena walked into that diner. But now it felt different, not like an ending, but like a beginning, like coming home.